Good morning, my favorite carboholics. It's Henry with Henry's Bread Kitchen and another episode of Baking Great Bread at Home. First, I want to thank all of you guys who are brand new members for telling us where you're from and for engaging in this fabulous group. I can't tell you, I've learned so much just from you guys. You know, particularly when you ask me questions, I'm really confident about the answer. I have an opinion about it, but then I go research it, and the next thing I know, I'm learning something, and I'm helping you guys with it because I'm a geek like that. So today we're doing chocolate babka. Now, babka is an ancient Jewish bread, and it's made with a dough that's similar to brioche, and it's got chocolate inside. You can put chocolate or nuts, or whatever you want inside of it. So I'm going to show you the base recipe today. And after you know what you're doing with this, then you can expound on it yourself with whatever you want to put in it on the inside. All right, so we're going to start off. Everybody got the recipe? Everybody got it? We're going to start off with 4 cups, which is 600 grams of flour. Don't start yet. I'm just going to run through these things to make sure that you have them. 2 1/4 tablespoons of yeast, which is about 14 grams. This is a recipe from Taste that I have adapted from their recipe. And at the last vanilla extract, pure vanilla extract is always better than the imitation vanilla extract. I know it's cheaper, but it'll last you a long time. So, do the right thing. Get some vanilla extract, some pure vanilla extract. 1/4 cup of sugar, that's about 60 grams. 1/4 cup of honey. And, the majority of the honey you buy in grocery stores isn't really honey. It's adulterated with other things. So what you need to do is find a place that provides you with solid, good, local honey. That'll help you with your allergies and everything else because the animals are feeding on pollen that is, affecting you. And I got one I can recommend. Scott Derrick has a place at Blythewood Bee Company. Great honey. So then 1 egg, 2 egg yolks, and 10 tablespoons of butter. That's a stick, and 2 more tablespoons. All right, so here's what we're going to do. For those of you who are not using instant yeast, you're going to have to warm your milk to 110 and then put your yeast in your milk in order to bloom it. And then we add it to the recipe. But because we're using instant yeast, and it's no more expensive, we're going to add it directly to our flour. We don't have to go through that blooming process. So I'm going to combine the milk and the yeast for those of you without instant yeast who have active dry yeast or some other baker's yeast. But let me do this and give you a piece of advice. Don't use this quick rise yeast in your bread. The problem with bread today, we talked about this, is that time is the most important ingredient in your bread. And no other substitute, no chemicals, additives, or anything can substitute for the time it takes to develop a handcrafted loaf of bread. So this kind of yeast rises fast. And once it rises so quickly, it'll begin to over a little bit, and then it won't have a lot of steam left, energy left to give you that last hurrah in the oven called oven spring. So that quick rise yeast is not something good. And a lot of you, and I was one of them, who were just in a little bit of a hurry, and the recipe calls 16 grams or 14 grams of yeast, and you add a little bit extra because you're in a hurry. That's not going to work. Bread doesn't work that way. Well, the difference between cooking and baking is that when you're cooking, everything is dead. But when you're baking, it's all alive. As soon as you get it all mixed together, it's alive. So you have to pay attention to it like it's alive. You can't add a pinch of this and a pinch of that and think it's going to be okay. It's not going to work. All right, so in a large bowl, let's add our eggs, egg yolks, vanilla, sugar, honey, and whisk those to combine. So, thought I'd do this with you. This is a whole egg. I'm just going to do this directly into my stand mixer. These should be at room temperature. All kind of fancy ways of getting yolks out of these eggs, like with soda bottles and plastic bottles. Do it. You know what I just did? I just dumped. That's okay. I just dumped another egg white in there. So let's do this part. I can't use the egg whites today. I did yesterday for breakfast, but not today. It was a good catch. All right. So my eggs are in. Yolks in. Vanilla is 7 milliliters of vanilla, or 1.5 teaspoons. 1.5 teaspoons. I'd rather do 7 milliliters like this. If you don't have a scale, this is for you new people because everybody else has heard me say this 100 times. If you don't have a scale, you need to get a scale if you're serious about baking at all. You got to. Everything comes out better. Vanilla, sugar, honey. So we're going to do 7 milliliters of vanilla, which we just did, and 60 grams of sugar, and 71 grams or 71 milliliters of honey. So let's get some sugar in it. The last bit of it, so now perfect. Throw that away. And 71 milliliters of honey. All honey is not created equal. And in this case, this is an orange blossom honey. So you're going to add 1/4 cup of honey. A trick here is to take some of your nonstick spray and spray it into your cup measuring device, and then put your honey in it, and it'll slide out of there a lot easier. All right, that is if you're using all of those things. But I'm using 71 milliliters. And we're going to combine this until it's well combined. Almost. Oh, it actually rose. We're good. So that's honey, sugar, your vanilla, and your eggs combined. And now we want to mix these together until they're well combined, and then we're going to add our yeast mixture. I put my stand mixer back here in the back. Hopefully it won't be as noisy. And we're going to start off with our paddle attachment. You can actually start off with your whisk attachment or whisk it by hand if you want. But since I'm going to be using my paddle attachment, I'm going to go ahead and get it dirty now. Now we're going to do that until it's well combined, and that won't take long at all. And then I'm going to add my milk. Now this can be whole milk, non-fat milk, 2% milk, whatever your diet calls for and recommends. So I'm going to be using whole milk. Now for you, using anything other than instant yeast, you would be proofing that in warm milk until it started to bloom to prove itself that it can let in your bread. Now, as you're baking, I want you to understand that recipes are guidelines. They're not meant, if something says it takes an hour to proof, you need to be checking it before that because the dough may tell you something different depending on the temperature in your house and what you have going on. So we follow the recipe, but as you mature and you get better, then you see them as guidelines. You don't mess around with the ratio of flour, water, salt, all of that. You just understand that some aspects of this are going to be what you intuitively know. So I've got my yeast mixture. Now we're going to add some flour, and we want to gradually add that flour in. And just like making more complex breads like a ciabatta or um, baguettes even, or anything that requires a really wet dough, you want to develop that glutinous as best you can early on without all the flour being there. So it calls for 600 grams of all-purpose flour, 4 cups. So if it were me, I would put 2 cups in here right now and mix that together. I'm going to use 300 grams. Now you notice I was weighing it with my paddle attachment in here. Um, as long as you zero it with the paddle attachment in there, you're good to go because it's reading 0. Just leave it in there. Let's get this. I want to show you what this looks like before we begin to add the remainder of the flour. You go slow at first so we don't end up with the flour all over the place. Then you can increase the speed. The rest of this flour is going to go in just a second, and then we're going to use some for dusting. The thing about flour is, in this recipe, and a lot of enriched dough recipes, they're very forgiving. Unlike the sourdough, you have to be very, very careful about what you put in. But this dough is pretty doggone forgiving. So you'll go, if you find yourself with a really wet mess, so you could add flour to your counter, or maybe even if it's sticking to the walls and it's not coming together in your mixer, just a tablespoon of flour might correct that enough for you because we want it to come together in a mass. Depending on what humidity is in your area, it may take a little bit more to do that. You can see this. See how that's like a pancakey mix now? All that flour is nice and incorporated. See that? Nice and incorporated. So I owe this flour another 300 grams and it's salt. Now that's just a habit of mine. You notice this recipe called for salt to go in here with the yeast and the eggs and everything. But I feel like if you're working on method, if you're a method baker, and most difficult breads require salt being added last, let's add salt last on everything, and that way we forget it. That way we don't forget it because you're doing the same thing every time. The easiest thing to forget in recipes is the salt. And there's nothing worse than a loaf of bread when you forgot the salt. So I've got 1 teaspoon of salt. That should be about 7 grams, I believe. Nine grams. Salt and yeast ratio are usually pretty close to each other. Now this paddle attachment is not gonna work but for just a minute. And then I'll switch over to my dough hook. It's gonna be too hard. Now, for those of you who don't like Nutella and want some other kind of chocolate in your babka, I posted a recipe for a really nice chocolate filling. So find that, skip the Nutella, and make your own chocolate. See, that's a little much now for my dough, for my paddle attachment. So, come bring it off here. It's almost ready to come together. Now this dough has a tendency to stick to the sides of the bowl. So let's do something about that now. All I'm going to do is go around the edges because I don't want any flour remaining on the bottom, and that can happen even when you're mixing with a stand mixer. All right, so we got it in something of a shaggy mass, but our goal is to get it smooth, and we're going to do most of that smoothing by hand. So let's go to our dough, shall we? Now I'm going to need 10 grams of this butter. One stick is 10 grams, 10 teaspoons. Nothing in tablespoons or teaspoons. Tablespoons. There's 8. And 2 more is 10. You see how much my mixture is struggling back there? You right struggling? Let's go up. All right, that's come together now into a ball. It's a mass. And it looks like it's really dry. And it's not going to be able to, stand mixer may not be able to handle it. But what we're going to do is add the butter now, add the fat. You need to have softened butter, room temperature. I'm just going to do 20 seconds on this. It's not quite as soft as I want it. So 20 seconds, you don't want it running. You just want it soft because the mixer's going to do the rest. And you want to add it little at a time. You can't add it all at one time because the bread won't take it up. So if you do a little at a time, the bread will be able to take it up, just like if you're doing a baguette or if you're doing a ciabatta. You are doing a second hydration with those, meaning you're adding additional water because it's really hard to add water to a dough all at one time. It'll just spin around in the bowl and won't do anything. Here's what I've got to deal with. Some of it got a little hotter than I wanted it to. So I'm going to add a little bit of this, half of that, about six tablespoons. And then I'll add this, the other two. See, right now that dough is sliding around in the bottom of that bowl. Once it takes that up, I'll add some more. Time to keep it clean. I've got this cord that I'm trying to dance with. Our next step is going to be some kneading. Now, kneading is different. Everybody, if it says 5 minutes of kneading, you might not be as strong as I am. You might not be as accomplished as Joanne. And so it may take a little longer for you. Like I said, the times and recipes are guidelines. What you're looking for is a smooth dough. That means that there's enough gluten structure in the dough you're creating to hold in the exhalations of the yeast, the CO2 that the yeast are giving off. And if it's strong enough, you're going to have a nice rise to your bread. If they're not strong enough and you under-kneaded it, then a lot of those gases are going to escape because the balloon is porous. But you want your gluten balloon to not be so porous. After it's proofed a while and you start to overproof it, it'll become porous again. So these are things you have to know in the back of your head that recipes don't tell you, that will allow you to get to know your dough better. Run that for a bit, and then we're going to flour our serpent. We can do some more. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. You don't want as much. You're not adding flour to your recipe. You're just creating a place where, because that's a sticky dough, and it won't stick to your hands so much. So the solution for that is to make sure your hands are floured. You don't want to necessarily add flour to your dough, because the recipe didn't call for it, remember? Excuse me? There you go. Alright, that's another 2 minutes, and then we're ready. So let's clean up a little bit. So if you guys have questions about what we're doing or about any other bread and you want to see us do something that you like or something that you have been struggling to do, comment below. So a lot of you are from different places. I know some from Thailand, some from Italy, a couple from South Africa. So what I'd like to see you do is to give us some breads that are kind of unique to your country that you can't find here in the United States. And we'll try and do those. All right, so that's come together. Is a pretty decent dough right there, but it's not smooth yet. So I put it on some flour, just a little bit, flour my hands, and then let's just see it's already really nice. And the reason we don't want to put a whole lot of flour on the counter is because we want the counter to be used as resistance. See that? That'll help in the resistance and won't add a lot of flour to your existing recipe. Your hands get sticky, add some flour to your hands and rub them together. You got a dough scraper that helps. In the show notes, you'll find the equipment that we use here. This is indispensable. A bench scraper. That's a bench scraper. The other tool you saw me using, the white one in the scraping dough out of the bowl, is a bowl scraper. If you don't have anything else in the house besides a scale, then those two things. This should take about 2 minutes to get right. You don't have to manhandle it, just back and forth. Now it's going to do a lot more kneading on its own as it proofs. You see, I always put flour out here that's not in the way of this. So if I do need some, I can go out here and get it, go out here and get it, and come back. Now, this feels amazing. This is going to be a beautiful dough. You can feel it. It's going to take longer to rise because it's an enriched dough. So it'll take about 2 hours to rise. All right, for the sake of what we're doing here today, that's enough. So now you just make a little ball with it, and you find a container and well grease it. You know what you do? You can use, this is clean. This is what we just used. We can put it right back in. Flip it over upside down, and then back. That way you know all the surfaces have gotten some oil on them. And that's important because you don't want to dry this dough out. It'll develop a skin if if air gets to it. Breezy. That's what you want in a non-breezy, relatively warm environment. 75, 80 degrees, somewhere in there. Good thing to do is to put it in your oven with your oven turned off and your oven light on. And if you do that, after an hour or so, you'll have about 80 degrees. So the light's on in there. We'll let that proof. Now that needs to only proof for 30 minutes. And you'll be able to tell, I'm sorry. That's going to have to proof. Does that cart have to proof for 2 hours? No. 30 minutes. And then you add your babka or your Nutella to it. But magically, I have one that's ready to go. So, I don't have to worry about damp hands right now because I've got enough flour and other things on my finger that it shouldn't stick. But I want to show you what that looks like. And see if I go in with my finger, it might behoove me to wet it a little bit. If I push my finger in, it stays in, but it's coming back out. See how it's rising back out? but it doesn't rise back all the way, that tells you that this is proofed, regardless of what the time says. The time says you still have 20 minutes. You don't. The bread's telling you I'm ready. Now, in this recipe, it calls for you to, at this point, divide your bread into two and work on them separately. You can do that. As a matter of fact, you probably should. But at this point is where you can really make a decision as to what you're going to do. If I'm making a babka that's in a bunt pan, I'm going to need more dough. Making for my family and a friend, then I do it a different way. So I get this shaped into a reasonable rectangle because I'm going to eyeball it. Whereas I could weigh it and get this in half. All right. Set this guy to the side, and you can cover it with a damp towel to keep it from. Or I can use one of these. This reuse it. That'll keep it from getting testy. This is too much because if I'm going to use my rolling pin, I don't want it sliding around on me. So it's got enough on it. Get yourself a nice rectangle. I've got people walking by with the door open, so excuse the sound. The weekend. So I'm rolling this out in kind of a long rectangle, nice and easy. You don't have to be physical with that. Now, for us, those of us using Nutella, there we go. And this is, this is the amount that I buy. So it's pretty good. I can remember how to get it. Okay. I don't have my spatula, but this will do. Now, with anything that you are adding to a dough like this, if it's cinnamon or sugar or blueberries or whatever it is, you want to give yourself a border of about a half an inch at least. So I always suggest you make your border first. This is not as good as a spatula, but it works. So here is my border up top, and then I don't have to worry about accidentally going back over that. Now, if your Nutella is uncooperative and not spreading really easily, here's my other border, then you can hit it in the microwave for a few seconds. I wouldn't do the whole container. I would just pull out what I needed. Now, at this point, which is what I did last night, I added walnuts to one and almonds to another here at this point. And don't overdo this. This is going to get everywhere. So just take your time and don't overdo it. So let's do it. You can start from either end. Now, if you're doing it right, you won't get this all over your hands and it won't get all over the outside of your bread. So that's a challenge. Let's see what we got. So stopped up. I'm breathing heavy. It's because I can't breathe. I'm going to seal it up there and right there. And then I'm going to seal it again. As I go down. You don't want this Nutella coming out of here, this chocolate, just for the heck of it. Now, flour, because it can't get in, but it will help. Now, if it's not where you want it to be, lengthwise, just take your time and make it, just shape it. Rolling it's not going to be a big deal, but it's not going to be a good thing. There's a long one. You can take the second one and make one like this and braid them both together. But I'm making two in a 5x7 in a smaller braid pan, which is 4. I can't even read it. A 9x4. Use some spray. In this case, we don't have to use flour in here. But now I'm going to cut it down the middle. Horizontally. Now, the recipe demonstrates a much more complicated braid. You're welcome to do that. It's one that looks like a checkerboard, a tic-tac-toe, and then you go under and over and around and about. I just think it's really confusing, and it's not going to taste any better. And I can do, for a lot of you, this is new. So just one over the other with the Nutella part, with the Nutella side facing up. See that? We didn't cut all the way through here because we want it to hold our place. Get to the end, just roll it, tuck it under, that seals it. Now we'll finish up what we started here. Now, if you're doing this you want to be really creative, do it in a bundt pan. Grease a bundt pan and take this braid, maybe even a little bit more dough with this one, and put it in a bundt pan, let it rise, it'll be beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So, but what I'm going to do, keeping the Nutella side up, see what everybody can see. I'm just going to come over and over again. So I'm just trying in my head to figure out how I want it. So let's go in like that. See that? So you can do this. It's going to rise. It's going to rise beyond this pan, or you could braid them both together. This is a nice size. This will feed about 6 people, 7 people. Generous sizes. Together, your whole thing should feed 12. It's got 12. What's determined is 12 servings. Okay. Let's do something different. Well, I don't have my equipment. I'm going to do some scoring. That's just on my rolling pin won't stick. Now, you can make this so many different ways with chocolate or cinnamon or blueberries, but it wouldn't be babka if it didn't have chocolate. In this case, Nutella. And the reason you want a border is because your dough to be able to stick to itself. If you're trying to make this stuff stick to a place where you've gotten some Nutella on it, it's not going to stick. It's not going to close up. And that's where you can get your leaks. All right. Now, let's roll this up. See my borders? That's what you want. Start at the one end, go to the other. Go down once you get close to your sealing spot. You can start after this roll. See that? And I've got a border. So now I'll roll it over to the border and seal it. The fact you tell us are escaping here, this will seal. Getting a little flour on it. Look at that. So you can do it, you can get creative however you like with this. I'm going to put this back in this pre-mold mold, and then I'll take it out and put it on a piece of parchment paper and put it in the oven on the parchment, just on the parchment. Now that's got to rise for a couple of hours. All right. So let's take a look at what it looks like. I made these two last night ahead of time. And these are so good with, you get some confectioner sugar, powdered sugar, and dust these, or you can make a glaze as if you don't have enough sugar already. So here is one. Here's what that looks like. It's a braided one like we just put in that pan. This one is, I decided to keep all of the Nutella inside the bread itself. See that? And it just made a decoration here with some scissors actually. I just went click, click, click. And you can get really creative with however you want to dress your bread up. But this is good. This is really nice. So let's cut into it and see what we got. Close that door. Thank you. I got some help. Be closing the door for me. All right. Look at that. There's the camera. So in this one, I left the log long and just pulled the two ends together and then put it in my pan and sealed the ends. And you see the ends look sealed completely. And you've got Nutella in every bite. And walnuts, because there's walnuts in this one. So let's examine the structure for a minute. You see all the little holes, and you want to check here to make sure this is not gummy. This is in all your breads. Make sure that the bottom is not gummy. That's an indication, if it were, that um, you've not cooked it at a high enough temperature or either for long enough. Chances are it's a high enough temperature. But these are done. They thump on the bottom like a drum when you first take them out, and the internal temperature was at 197 to 200 degrees. So there we are, gentlemen and ladies. Babka with Nutella. I want to thank all of you for joining me today, and especially all you new boos. You come to us with so much different uh, talent, with so many different parts of the bread baking expertise, and we all benefit from it, and we all grow from it. And I know there's a lot of you out there baking bread and not sharing your pictures with us because you're embarrassed, or you just don't want to do it, or you don't think it looks good. That's not the way we operate here. Everything goes up. Good, the bad, and the ugly. Okay, so next week we've got some special things going on. You'll hear more about those as the week progresses. And remember, nothing can substitute for the time it takes to create a handcrafted loaf of bread. No chemicals, no additives. This is what bread's supposed to taste like. We'll see you next week. Enjoy. Thank you, everybody.